Hey everyone, welcome back to Bagel TCG. Today we're going to be doing a tier list video looking at the classic constructed meta after US Nationals and the first week or two of Nationals are through. I feel like we've learned a lot about the meta, especially since I made my last video, which was a predictive tier list way before the set released. Now we've had almost a month, I think, of classic constructed games with the set fully released at major events. I feel like we've learned a lot, and I think we still have two or maybe more weekends of nationals to go, plus the pro tour after, which will all be this format. So I think it's good to continue to do tier lists and update what we think about the meta as we go. But let's hop into it. I think there is only one S tier. We haven't had this in a while. If you look at a lot of my previous tier lists for the last 6 months or so, I think typically the S tier is like 3 to 5 heroes. Maybe it was like KO meta with KO and Dorinthia and like Dromai or stuff like that. I think we've had quite a diverse meta for a while, and I think this is finally, for better or worse, depending on what kind of player you are, one of the least diverse metas in terms of if you really want to win your event. I think you should only bring Zen to an event if you really want to win it. He's by far the best deck. He can deal like 35 to 50 damage turns within the first few turns, semi consistently. Even if he has a bad matchup, like for example, I think he's somewhat unfavored into like New and Guardian, these disruptive decks. Sometimes if they don't draw their disruption, the Guardian draws 4 blues and Zen deals 65 damage. It doesn't really matter, right? That it's a slightly unfavored matchup. So he has such blowout potential along with the consistency of doing it that I think he's the clear best deck. I think he's probably what everyone should be on if you just want to play the best deck. But I do think he has a few counters that can win the majority of the time into him and just lose when he gets the high rolls. And he's always going to be able to do that. So I'd say Zen is the only S tier right now. He's pretty absurd. I think Traverse is way too good. I don't think they'll get rid of it because it's a legendary. I totally understand. It's a key card to, especially Zen and Enigma, but it's even quite good in new. So I think it's a key card. But I do think Traverse Universe is much too good of a card. I think it's way too high in power level. But like I said, I don't think it'll go because it's kind of a key card for them. Kasaya, his chess piece is also probably a little too good, but I think it's a bit more balanced than the headpiece. And then, yeah, Bonds of Ancestry is also pretty broken, and I don't think that'll be taken away either because it's pretty core to Katsu, and I don't want Katsu to lose it. But I think he just has too many good things going for him all at once. All three of those, like Art of War, Bonds of Ancestry, Traverse the Universe, and 12 Petal Kasaya, are all too good, especially Traverse. Traverse is probably top 3 equipment of all time. Like it might be as good as Crown of Seeds almost when it comes to headpieces. Not quite as good, but it's pretty close. Anyways, there's not too much more to say. He's won the majority of events so far. And I think the ones he hasn't won often are like smaller nationals that have like 30 people, or he's not going to win any event even at bigger ones. But especially for like bigger ones, I think he won the US and UK, which are two of the larger ones in the last 2 weekends. So yeah, he's quite good. Um, in A tier is mostly going to be decks that can beat Zen, because otherwise you really shouldn't be on the deck right now if you can't beat Zen. Or maybe it beats like everything except Zen, and then maybe it's still worth playing, and you just have to dodge like the 20% of Zens. I think we'll start with Kano. Kano is probably the closest to S tier. Kindle is also a little too pushed. That's a really good new card for him. I think it makes it so he can high roll almost as often as Zen can. Maybe not quite as much, but that's debatable. He just blows people up. I've seen quite a lot of turn 0, turn 1 kills, and Kindle really allows that to happen. So cards really pushed, and Kano was already A tier, I'd say. I think I had him in A tier, maybe high B or A tier for a while, and now I think he's like the best A tier and maybe almost S tier. He is, depending on who you asked, favored or unfavored into Zen. I personally think if the Zen has like the AB and Spell Void suite, Zen's probably a little favored. But just as easily, Kano can like explode him, especially because Zen does need to fill his graveyard a little bit. And Kano doesn't really allow him to block, so it's an interesting matchup. I think because he has so many blues and can run Arcane Barrier and Spell Void, maybe Zen's a little favored, but it's quite close, and I wouldn't be too stressed about the Zens if I was on Kano. You can kind of just do the same thing as Zen. Like both of these decks don't really care about what the opponent's doing at all. They just want to deal like 50 plus damage in one turn, and then like the opponent dies. So I think neither these decks are both pretty proactive, really don't want to interact with the opponent at all, and they do a pretty good job at it. Um, Also, I'll put New up in A tier. I think New has a lot of problems, and I think she's probably one of the more unsolved heroes in the meta. Obviously, she is one of the newest, so that makes sense. But she does have just such a high level of disruption that I think if she draws okay, and especially if the Zen draws only okay, like if they're both drawing 5 out of 10, she should win the majority of the time into Zen. She has so much disruption. Leave No Witness, Codex, Weakest Link, Bonds of Ancestry, Persuasive Prognosis. I mean, I think you have upwards of almost 30 disruptive cards, definitely over 20, especially if you count Codex grabbing them back. And then if you count like Mask with your Chi, yeah, it's quite a high number of disruptive cards. So you're basically able to present 1 to 2 at least per turn. So I think she's quite good. She has definitely bad matchups. Kano, obviously, right next to her, is not very good. She kind of has the Guardian problem, where she's very good at being disruptive, but quite slow because of that. So anything that can set up like Illusionist will also be doing pretty well into her. Um, Next, I will put KO. I don't think KO is favored into Zen, but he can run some of the disruptive sixes, like Weakest Link and Send Packing and Command and Conquer, and even maybe Amnesia. So I think he has some disruption, which is good, and he has good armor block. He also does quite a lot of damage. I think even if Zen is the better option now, KO hasn't fallen that far. He was the best deck for quite a few months, and I don't think he's dropped off the face because of that. So he's still a decent pick, but if you want an aggro deck, I think Zen's probably the better pick. I'm not. These are like kind of the core people I'd put in A tier. There's quite a few that are like on the border that I'd want to consider. I think both Illusionist, Enigma, and Prism, as well as Dash and Dash IO, are all pretty good, as well as Azalea. I think Azalea probably does make it into A tier because she can disrupt Zen as well. She just has a ton of power. She's also been a staple of the high tiers for a while, along with Kano. She's also getting an armory deck, which we saw provided KO a pretty decent buff, so I expect will help Azalea out as well. So I think she's in a good spot. I think once again, if I was going to play an aggro deck, I'd probably just play Zen. But I think if you want alternative aggro decks, both Azalea, who's more disruptive, and KO, who's a bit better at blocking, are other aggro deck options. I think I'll put the Illusionist, though, at the top of B tier. They both do quite different things. Prism, yeah, has heralds, and so actually does have a decent plan into the aggro decks because they don't pop very well, except maybe KO. And she can also switch to the more Aura Spectra build into slower decks, which would really wreck, Kano or New here. So she has that. Enigma actually has something similar. People have been seeing this pummel build. I played it a little bit. It's the one that Michael Fang, I guess, kind of first showed off. He's the first person I saw playing it. It's pretty nice. It's much better into the aggro decks because you're never going to be able to establish ward into them. And then the ward plan is obviously much better into like the Kanos in the news. So it can also pivot a bit. I think we haven't really found the best Enigma deck that can pivot yet. I think Prism's a bit more solved. So neither one's completely solved, but I would probably recommend Prism a bit more since people do know what they're doing a bit more. But if you want the surprise factor, then Enigma is the better illusionist. I'm gonna put the dashes after. The boost version is what I would focus on with both mechanologists. I guess Dash IO basically only has the boost version, but the boost version of OG Dash is also probably the better version. You might not even need the pistol package right now because there's almost nothing you would play it into. So I'd probably go full boost. I think we had at UKNats full boost Dash, OG Dash, get top 8. So not quite sure which one's better. I think maybe I would go with Dash IO if I'm going full boost, but I think they're both great options. And there's probably small reasons to play each one over the other. Full boost is interesting because T-Bone and Magnetic Shockwave, these cards that take equipment, can be quite nice into the aggro decks. Zen really wants to block with his equipment when he wants to, and even KO and Azalea kind of don't want to have to block with their equipment unless they want to. So those cards are quite good. They're also pretty favored into Kano and the Illusionist when they're on full boost. The only thing they're going to lose to here is New, who would probably wreck full boost, but would lose to pistols. But I don't think it's worth having pistols if this is the meta and you're only needing it for one hero. That's kind of a waste of slots, especially because New's not that well. She's pretty popular, but not as popular as all of this added together. So um, yeah, they're great options. Other good aggro decks, they do have some play into the top aggro decks, but I still think they're just not quite good enough. Trying to think if there's anything else. I suppose Levia can make it up here. Um, yeah, Levia is pretty nice. I think KO is just the better brute, but Levia has some interesting things she can do. With the new chest piece, the KO chest piece, I can't remember the name. She can do some pretty large lines. Her new expansion card, I think it's Shadow Realm Horror, is also quite good. But she does always have a little bit of consistency issues. Um, I know Levia's always tell me that those are gone, but I still see them happen. And I think maybe she just does less damage and blocks a little worse overall than KO. So I would probably just go with the slightly more consistent Brute and KO. But if you want to play something a little offbeat, Levia is a great dark horse pick. So if I was going to event, I would probably look at these 10 heroes. These are like S through B tier for me are usually like you could bring this to an event probably, and if you have the deck tuned enough and enough practice, you can win. I think all of these will win in nationals. I think Zen is like the most obvious choice and probably what I would recommend most people bring. But for example, I am a Guardian player and don't really like playing aggro decks, so I'll probably play like New, who is the viable disruptive deck. I kind of also think Enigma's fun, so even if I'm like listing it like this, doesn't mean you have to play Zen. I just think he's the clear best option. Basically everything else I think is kind of garbage right now. I think you could put like Max is okay, and Azuri's okay. Victor's probably okay. These all have some game into maybe the aggro decks like Victor and Azuri, and maybe even Max does as well. I think the Warriors, Bravo, all the other Guardians, Teklo, the Rune Blades are all pretty garbage. I wouldn't play that or that. Maybe Katsu's okay. I mean, he still has Bond's line, but there's just like almost zero reason to play him. He's since Zen is also doing the Bonds line, he doesn't even have a unique identity. He's just like straight up worse Zen in almost every way. Bolton has always been pretty okay. I think he's worse right now because Raiden has always been a little weak into the like his biggest weakness has always been ninjas. If you ask most really good Bolton players, they'll say one of the worst matchup is Ninja, and like Ninja is the best deck right now. So maybe not Bolton's time to shine. I think he was a lot better last meta because he had a pretty good KO matchup and a good Guardian matchup, and the two most played decks were KO and Victor. So maybe last meta was made better for him. Arachne's basically always been bad. And then Riptide's actually okay. Wait, I shouldn't discount Riptide because Riptide has been doing some cool things. He's basically like worse Azalea, but has some slightly more powerful stuff with his blue specialization traps, and can go like maybe a little more red line because you can play zero cost arrows without loading them because of his hero ability. So he has some interesting things. I would basically always play Azalea over him. He's like for me like KO and Levia. Like if you just want to be different, you can play Levia. If you just want to be different, you can play Riptide. But he's pretty good. He's pretty good. He's been surprising me with his results, and I've played against it a few times, and like he's strong. But I think also it's just like Ranger's card pool is strong. I think you could put like a clown face on a card and give it the Ranger card pool, and it would do fine. So yeah, he's cool though. I like Riptide. I think it's funny that he's a little smelly boy. So, anyways, this is the tier list where I would put it right now. Um, yeah, Zen is like the clear best option. Then you have some stuff that can maybe beat Zen. I think Azalea, New, and Kano especially can probably beat it. Maybe KO has the hardest time, but can still do it. Then all of these decks are just also doing something powerful. Maybe can beat Zen, and also can maybe beat each other a little bit. But I probably wouldn't recommend playing any of these decks down here. Basically, all of them, or at least the majority of them, will auto lose to Zen in the majority of the time. I think maybe Azuri and Victor are the only two that have a decent chance into Zen. I think the rest, like almost all, auto lose to Zen. And Zen's a large part of the field and pretty insane, so I would just play him. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Let me know how your Nats is going, or if you already did it, how it went. I'll hopefully be making a little more content coming soon. I've had a little bit of downtime as I was on holiday for a bit, but I'm excited to see everyone, especially because PT Amsterdam is coming up, and I live in Amsterdam. So I'll hopefully see you all then. See you next time.